Mic Drop Moments is sponsored by Grow Radio. Want to launch your own podcast? Grow Radio are here to help. Grow Radio has launched and supported countless podcasts, and they'd love to do the same for you. Just hit record and they'll handle the rest. No editing stress, no technical faff, just a great podcast released when you want. Need a little extra support? Grow Radio's workshops and courses make getting started easy. Let's bring your podcast to life. Message Grow Radio on social media or reach out to Gary Jones, the founder of Grow Radio. Let's make this happen. Welcome to Mic Drop Moments, and today I'm chatting with Eve Stanway. Now, we've heard from Eve before in a previous podcast episode, and I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes. But Eve, please introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Hello, thank you for having me here, Sandra. I am Eve Stanway. I am a psychotherapist, breakup divorce coach, and difficult conversations expert.
Difficult conversations, right? We're going to dig right into that, and we're going to have a difficult conversation because most people tend to avoid them, and we'll talk about why. You wrote a book, wrote and published a book last year, Conversations at the Shoreline, which was all about difficult conversations. And that was sparked from a difficult conversation that your ex-husband had with you. Do you just want to tell us a little bit about that and how this all came about and why you wrote that book?
Yes, I would. So my background's in philosophy and psychotherapy, and a psychotherapist for 25 years. And must be about 9 years ago now, my ex-husband said he wanted a divorce. He asked me for a divorce, and the world, as anybody who's been through that process, the world kind of dropped out from under my feet. And I started being angry and annoyed and helpless and hopeless and all of these different things. But then I think I kind of went back into my own thought process and had some reflections and realized he had had a difficult conversation with me. He had been prepared to do it. And actually, what was revealed was that I had been avoiding difficult conversations myself. So on the one hand, I'm a real expert in psychotherapy and all these different things, but in my personal life, I was avoiding difficult conversations. And by having that, he opened my eyes to the fact of what I was avoiding and not I didn't know how to do, but also just how significant and transformational a difficult conversation can be. Even if it lands hard in the moment, it creates such growth in the future going forwards. And so I'm just so grateful for him for being willing to do it.
And I heard you speak at an event recently where you said you were just so grateful for that difficult conversation because it's led to so many opportunities that you probably wouldn't have done if that conversation had never happened.
I wouldn't. I was thinking at the time before all this happened, I was thinking about writing a book about please learn about my feelings. And it was only going through that process. And it's so funny how life fixes your attention. I thought, now it's about difficult conversations. It's about the ones we avoid and the ones we need to have. And where do you find out how to have them? Because we can know we should do stuff, but how is the question? And that's the question I set out to answer. And that's the path I've ended up on.
Yeah, and it's an amazing
Mm.
part. So give us some examples. Where might a difficult conversation occur? Because it's not just through divorce, it's through a whole set of different circumstances. So give us some examples.
Okay, so difficult conversations can happen very prosaically in your everyday. Please can I have a little bit more help around the home? Please can I have a bit more time to work on my book? Please can I'm getting up early to do this particular thing. Can everybody not get up with me because I just want that time alone? Difficult conversations can also happen when we see a friend, perhaps heading towards something that we might consider is a mistake, or we know somebody is perhaps they're avoiding going to the doctor when they need to go, or we can see that they're struggling and they need to have a rest, but we're not sure how to broach it. Or we can see that somebody we know and love has a pile of admin and we're getting annoyed with a stack of paper because we're getting worried on their behalf. Or it can be, I mean, this is a really classic one that I have with loads and loads of couples I work with. You get one side in the couple who wants to leave on time, and for them, on time is leaving 10 minutes earlier, whereas the other person wants to leave on time, and their on time means leaving 10 minutes late. And so what happens is you get conflict where really what you would hope is there could be a difficult conversation. Can we agree when we're going to leave and how we're going to go up to it and how we're going to talk to each other about leaving so that we don't end up having a row when we step out the house?
Do you think a
Or
lot
if,
of do you think a lot of arguments are based around not having those conversations then? Because
yeah,
it maybe not even in personal life. I can imagine where difficult conversation. I've had difficult conversations in my work life.
yeah,
You know, when you're at senior level and you have to have a difficult conversation
yeah,
with a junior employee or with a colleague, or
mm,
even saying no to a client and that you don't want to work with them anymore. That's one of the most difficult conversations I've ever had, telling
yeah,
somebody you don't think you're the right fit for them.
yeah, yeah, exactly that. And if you look at the structure of a difficult conversation, there's a couple of short, small variations, but it is the difference between me saying what I need or how I feel and me worrying about what your reaction might be. And I think that the roots of that are in childhood. I think because when we're children, we're often trying to talk about stuff. And, you know, historically, children were told to be seen and not heard and be pleasant and speak when they're spoken to and all of these other things. And we've now moved to a society where I think we really encourage children to question things. But certainly when I was young, I was not encouraged. In fact, I was actively discouraged from questioning things and certainly questioning things that other adults did. So the framework in childhood actually often runs against having difficult conversations, and therefore there's that expectation that there'll be conflict or there will be a difference or we'll let somebody down or we'll upset them. And so we've already decided how they're going to react, and we don't have a structure for saying, Sandra, I need to have this difficult conversation with you. Here's what I'm thinking and feeling. I'm not sure how you're going to react, but I'm going to dare it anyway, in the hopes that we can perhaps disagree, but we can disagree and move forwards rather than never reaching the point where we're even knowing what the disagreement is.
Yeah.
Because we can disagree, we can be disappointed, we can survive that, but we we don't think we can, but we can, you know?
And I think not every difficult conversation has to end in a breakup or
Absolutely.
end in, and I think it's important to say that by having the difficult conversation, it could be a coexisting and working together to find a resolution. But it's also, it doesn't have to mean a parting of the ways of you
No,
know, in a friendship or a relationship
absolutely not.
or in the workplace. It doesn't have to mean going your separate ways.
Well, if you think about it, and I think this is kind of logical when we think about it, if we're in a situation with a friend or a colleague or a business partner or whatever it is, and we feel that we can't speak about certain things that are important to us or perhaps important to them, then not being able to speak about those subjects, you can see how, from a logical point of view, ultimately that leads to a divergence in paths because we're going to have to then work harder and harder and harder and never go on to go on to that difficult topic, which means ultimately the only way to get comfortable is to break the relationship. Whereas actually being knowing this structure, this clear structure on how to have a difficult conversation means that we can find out what you're thinking, you can find out what I am thinking. Who knows, maybe we're not as far apart as we thought we were. Or we are really far apart, in which we can say, "Oh my God, we really shouldn't be in business together. You know, you're not my ideal client because we've got really different outlooks. But here, let me help you find somebody who's better for you." So
Yeah.
connection requires us to be able to understand the other person, and that requires very often us to be able to have a difficult conversation. And therefore, I believe that they're crucial actually to maintaining healthy relationships.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was brought up to be non-confrontational.
Mm.
My dad, one of his favorite terms was, "Oh, just keep the peace, just agree, just say yes, just to
Yes.
keep the peace." And that was his. Not that I had a volatile childhood, but my
Mm.
mother was quite strong and opinionated. And if I
Mm.
disagreed with her, which I did a lot,
Yeah.
just keep the peace, just agree with her,
Yeah.
just keep the peace. And
Mm.
that made me very non-confrontational to the extent where I believe I stepped back from having difficult conversations so as to keep the peace.
Absolutely. But the peace that we keep isn't peace, it's isolation. Because
Mm.
actually, peace is when we have had a difficult conversation and we've resolved it. So that, the peace between me and my ex-husband is much more clear and open and honest now than the kind of pretended, silent, isolated, non-confrontational peace that we had during our marriage, where we were stuck. Um, and now we're not stuck. We still don't agree, but we're not being silent to keep the peace because it isn't peace. It's isolation.
Yeah,
It's
interesting.
loneliness, you know.
Interesting perspective. And so you're now wanting to impact the world with this, and you want to make this available to everybody. And so you're writing the second book. So tell us about what the second book, why do you want to write that second book?
So it was always my intention to think about difficult conversations in lots of different environments. I'd always had that in mind. And I think, I mean, you know this yourself, and I'm sure lots of people who are listening will resonate with it. We kind of do the things, we deliver into the world the things that matter to us. My children at the moment are 18 and 23. And I've noticed all of their friends growing up and all the other mums networks that we're in. And I look at the difficult conversations that we as parents are having with our young adults, and looking at how those young adults are managing and negotiating difficult conversations in the workplace. And I've also got lots of people that I know who are working with young adults. They're bringing in apprentices and so forth into their businesses. And the reality is we kind of come from a different age, a lot of us, compared with how we've raised our children to how we were raised. It's very different, not just social media, but actually social constructs of how much we allow our children to have input into their and our own lives. So it felt to me that moving this into the difficult conversation space between parents and their young adult children, because the relationship between a parent and a child is very different than a parent and a young adult. And if we want to sustain good relationships, and we know that there's so many people who are kind of cancelling contact with their parents at the moment, um, these are really good and important relationships to carry forwards. And it also kind of gives me the opportunity to share this difficult conversation idea with young adults so that they can see that they too can have difficult conversations, because I genuinely believe it's the most transformational thing I can offer to the world, really, is how to have these difficult conversations. So it's my
Yeah.
mission.
I look at that and I actually think, I've got a really good relationship with my two boys. We didn't have while they were teenagers, but as they've grown up and matured, we can
Mm.
have those conversations now. But when I look at young people today, and as you said, they're grown up in a very different environment to what we did and what I did. Have they become isolated because they've become so reliant on technology? Because I know when I've had young people into the workplace, they can't have a conversation, let alone a difficult one. Some of them can't even communicate because they've just been attached to a tablet or a computer or something. So how do you deal with that?
So it's interesting that you say because. You see, I'm not sure if that is the causal link. I, in my work, looking at, and the researches that I've done on this, I think actually the problem is parents who are connected to social media. And parents, my generation of parents and parents who are younger, very, very concerned. We raise our children very differently now. We raise them in much smaller groups, often less family. Um, the divorce statistics are 42% of marriages ending in divorce, which means that far more children are being raised in lone parent households. And actually, what I see is a lot of parents who struggle perhaps with their social media or their telephone usage, which means that those conversations that they would have been having much more naturally with their children, that alignment with their children during those teenage years becomes broken. So I think that children actually, when I talk to them, and I do talk to young adults a lot about this, they're fairly good at managing their social media. They're fairly good at having relationships. My daughter's got global relationships with people across social media. They all know where they are on Snapchat. They know that, oh, she's in Spain, she's in Italy, she's in America. But actually, because we are frightened for our children, we tend to be authoritarian. Oh, you shouldn't be on the phone. Why are you on the phone? Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? That's not communication, that's telling. And you know the in business we say show don't tell in storytelling. Well, we're not showing, we're telling. And I think that that's what stops the interaction between children and adults, because the teaching system's doing that,
Mm.
which, and then we blame it on social media. But I don't actually think social media is the issue. I think we are the issue. And that is why I'm writing a book for parents to read and say, I'm sorry, but it was just like my ex-husband asking for a divorce. I was part of the problem and I need to stop putting it out onto something else.
Mm.
I don't believe it is social media. I think they're going there because we are not being safe as conversational spaces for them a lot of the time.
Interesting
I think,
perspective.
I
Interesting.
think,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So, obviously, when's the book due out? It's due out.
May next year, hopefully.
Yeah, yeah. So at the time of recording, you've got your first book out, it's published,
Mm.
you're writing the second book, due to come out in May 2026.
Mm.
So what's after that? I mean, I can see you writing a whole series of these books, and I'm sure you've got a plan
Yes.
to do that.
Do you
Um,
know? I do.
Go on, yeah,
I
go
do.
on. And so, what would be the next? So, you want to deal with young people and those difficult conversations. You've done sort of difficult conversations in marriage and those on divorce. What's the next?
So, as always, I've got choices. I think the crucial areas I would like to consider. I think that there is a space for a conversation about difficult conversations between people towards their midlife and their parents who may be older at that stage, because I can see that there's a communication breakdown very often between our older adults and kind of my kind of age group. I think I would also have a plan, but it's going to take me a bit longer, I think, to learn enough between neurodivergent and non-neurodivergent people, because I think the conversational structures there could be improved, actually. And also business, but I don't mean big businesses. I mean smaller and medium-sized businesses who are perhaps struggling with their own difficult conversations, which is a little bit different from the kind of large corporates. But these are organizations where maybe people are leaving, because that's what you see in the statistics. People leave organizations because of a failure in difficult conversations.
Yeah,
They get lost to the workplace, and we know that the workforce is, such an integral part of all organizations, but people will leave.
yeah, yeah.
And I think I'd like to do something about that. And obviously, there's always divorce and breakup and relationships.
So, if somebody
You've got kids,
was,
you have to carry on having a relationship. That's the trouble. So just got to do
yeah.
it. So yeah, lots
So,
of books.
So if somebody is listening to this or watching this on YouTube and thinks, gosh, I really need to have that conversation, I
Mm.
don't know where to start, what would you suggest would be a good place for them, or a question they could ask themselves, or something that would, as a next step, as it were, to think about how to broach that subject or how to prepare for it?
Okay, so I spent a lot of time thinking about a strategy, and I came up with what I called my magic three: clarify, communicate, and correct. And it's broadly this: clarifying is saying, what is it that I want? What is it that I need to say? This is not saying you're doing this, why do you never do this? Oh, you need to do that. This is an I statement. What do I need? And then calming yourself down and thinking about it. So that's the first thing. What do I need? I need more space in the mornings. Communicating it is broaching that subject, saying it to the other person. The crucial aspect is, because it's a difficult conversation, it will go wrong. It's always going to go wrong, otherwise, it's not difficult. And when it does go wrong, being able to relax your shoulders, put your feet on the ground, take a breath, and then repeat what you initially said. I need more space in the morning. Well, you get space and you never do it, blah, 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 they say. And you go, I agree with what you're saying. However, I need more space and I could do with some help. So what happens is that we repeat in a calm way. And that is my strategy. Work out what you want. This is what I need, not what the other person is doing. Take some time. It's really hard to do this. To go, no, it's about me. What do I want? What do I want? Say it, and then when it goes wrong, repeat, and be willing to repeat 6 or 7 times. The analogy I use is, I'm not a helicopter pilot, but if I was, I can imagine trying to land on the H in a windy day. You're probably going to have to go around a few times to hit the thing, and that's how we should view a difficult conversation. And that's my simple strategy, which I teach people how to do.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Sadly, we have run out of time, Eve. I always ask my guests to leave us with a mic drop moment or top tip piece of advice for the audience. You've already shared your strategy, but what would be a key thing or a key message you would like to leave the audience with?
I think the key message I would say is think of that difficult conversation you were avoiding, and instead of imagining all the conflict and the things going wrong, take a second to imagine how different and transformed your world would be by having that conversation, and dwell on that, visualize that, because life changes with one difficult conversation. It really, really does.
Well, thank you for chatting with us today. Today, I've been chatting with Eve Stanway, the difficult conversations expert, and I know you're going to do amazing things in 2026. Thank you, Eve.
Thank you so much, Sandra.